What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, and we are going to be breaking down the Week 5 showdown slate between the San Francisco 49ers traveling to face their division rival, the Los Angeles Rams. It is 5.5-point total, and we are going to have to do a ton of pretend in this one because there are so many injuries, key injuries that we'll get into that are going to really shape up how we go about. They're really going to shape up how we go about this slate because if this guy is out, then obviously these guys are in play. If both of these guys are in, neither of these guys are in play. And we're going to be doing a lot of pretend on that. You're going to have to join our Discord, check out and be on the lookout for our final lines on Thursday. We usually post them about an hour prior to the kickoff, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time, at least if you are in the middle of the United States. If you're on the East Coast, blah, blah, blah. We're doing Central Time based on where we live. So please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you have not already. We got a lot of positive turnout from last week with the Week 4 showdown between the Seahawks and the Cardinals, where we had a ton of views. We had a ton of new subs, got over that 300 threshold, so we can't thank you guys enough. But continue. We're going to 400. We had a really profitable week this past week, and even though the showdown last week ended up not going too much in our favor in terms of, huge payouts, the weekend success was a beyond successful Monday slate. Both showdowns cashed. The Monday slate in its entirety, the two gamer, really cashed well. So very strong positive outputs. Our must plays are really working out. College Dusty is killing it right now. Emery's chiming in where he can. And we're going to keep on going, and we're going to do our best to give you the best possible content out there. So join the discussion, and let's get right into the slate. And as we jump on over to the slate, do want to give a huge shout out to the Gale and Bailey Gerard, a close friend of ours, both friends of the show. Really good calls out, especially on Monday in terms of props betting. They're really active in that market. DFS wise, did a really good job, like we said previously in the intro. So hopefully this slate, it'll be a really fun one. I was really excited about this slate, but then this injury kind of makes it a little bit of an unknown because we don't really know truly how this is really going to go about. And like I said, we're going to have to play a little bit of pretend. But starting with the away team, the San Francisco 49ers, 5.5-point underdogs. And essentially, it is the CMC show. I'm going to just leave him by himself because he is the offense right now. Right now, if I remember correctly, in PPR formats, he would be the wide receiver 8 overall if you just included his receiving stats. Now, pile that on the fact that he's getting about north of 17 rushing attempts a game so far. He has not really been effective on the ground. He has not had a rushing touchdown. He's barely been over 4 yards carry in only one of the 4 games so far. Failed to eclipse 70 yards. This is not the matchup for him to do that because the Rams so far are first against running backs, and a matchup-proof guy like Saquon Barkley obviously was a huge bust. JT, Jonathan Taylor, back-to-back 30-point weeks, and then really just did not work out based on his price last week. So Christian McCaffrey, additionally a matchup-proof guy. He, Bijan Robinson, because of their pass-catching upside, really are in a tier of their own right now, just because even though the Rams are a tough matchup, he's getting there to 20-plus points, even in games he doesn't score touchdowns. He doesn't need bonuses. He just needs targets. In 3 of the 4 games this year, he's had at least 10 targets. He's had 6 receptions in every game, and he is far and away the main guy. I am shocked that he is not let me go over to the flex pricing. I am shocked that he is not north of $12,000 on this slate, especially when we talk about some of the guys available for the Rams. I would have thought that they would have forced you to have to choose between him or Puka, or not be able to so easily incorporate both. That just is going to in turn make a lot of people have heavily duped lines. So with all this, the injuries, just be aware you may be really okay leaving a lot of salary on the table. So it's really easy to get up to one of these 2 high-priced captains if you wanted to go that route. The question is, what quarterback are we getting? Brock Purdy missed 2 games, did return this past week, and he was not that effective. He did have a great fantasy output because he got to that 3-yard bonus, but he had 3 turnovers, first loss of the season to the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. Fantasy-wise, if that's what matters on the showdown, he got there. We saw last week where Kyler Murray played terribly through 3 quarters, had 5 fantasy points, but halfway through the 4th quarter was an excellent fade, my fade of last week. And then he gets there with 2 play from behind passing touchdowns. Sam Darnold played excellent, only was involved on 1. And so Kyler ends up being the optimal quarterback because of the fact that he salvaged and got there. That's exactly what Brock Purdy did against the Jaguars last week. But at the same time, it sounds like there's a chance he could be out. He was a non-participant or listed as non-participant Monday and Tuesday. There was a report that if the game was today, he would not play, but 2 days is a long day away. Obviously, on a short week, that is very concerning comment to really put out there, the fact that there is a legitimate chance that he could miss. Obviously, Mac Jones was serviceable in his regard, and price-wise, he's priced up as if, in case Brock Purdy does not play, he has the perfect opportunity to just come right in and be just as successful as he was previously. He had a 23-point week against the Saints, and then followed up with a reasonable 14.5 for the price that he was. $9,000 is not going to be enough on a showdown specific slate. But just worth noting, I don't really think there's a huge dip in terms of pass catching upside for if either quarterback are in. I still think that Christian McCaffrey will get the targets. I still think that whoever is there and healthy and whoever is healthy enough to catch passes for the San Francisco 49ers and getting the most snaps is probably going to just have as big of production as they would have if Purdy was in there, I would say. So with that said, let's kind of jump over to the receivers, because it is a tricky triangle to try to figure out. So you got Q-Tag, you got returning Kendrick Bourne, Demarcus Robinson revenge game, maybe. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has been a showdown king for us before, no longer with the Chiefs. I'm more, just for what it's worth, Ricky Pearsall left the game halfway through the game, did not return due to a knee injury. Juwan Jennings played 73% of the snaps. Kendrick Bourne played 67% of the snaps. But then once Ricky Pearsall left the game, Demarcus Robinson, in his first game active with the 49ers, inherited all of those snaps, essentially. 38% of the snaps in his first game with the 49ers, only had one target. Can't even fit him, or he had 2 targets. One caught one for 20 yards. He has the revenge narrative if you want to even bring that up. But him being 3,600, I don't think a lot of people are going to flock to him. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he could catch 0 for 0 for 0. He could catch 3 for 100 and a touchdown. I remember last year there was a live stream. We were looking for, we had a question out to our audience of guys that we thought less than 4,000 on the main slate who could pop off, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling came off with he had 2 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown the week before, and somebody brought him up. We ended up playing and were overweight to the field because of that, and he had 2 touchdowns and 100 yards in the first half. One of the best calls of the entire season from the GTD community was that very guy right there. But obviously, being on a new team, it's a new situation. Kendrick Bourne, like I said, did inherit most of the snaps. At least he's been the most productive of all these bunch, but it's not like you can really lean on that too much. But $4,600, you got to invest in them. But the upside is there, especially if a Juwan Jennings, who was listed as a non-participant both practices, so was Ricky Pearsall. We know Juwan Jennings missed a game. He's just severely banged up. I mean, he had a calf injury, I think, going into during the preseason. Then he had an ankle where he left the game in week 1. Then week 2, when he returned, had a really strong performance. But then he kind of banged himself up or re-aggravated something to where he missed week 3. Week 4, he got popped in the ribs, I think, was the reason behind his injury. So he's dealing with a lot right now. If he plays, he's a potential wide receiver 1 for the 49ers. I think if you had to tell me there is one of these 2 guys are playing and the other is not, I think Ricky Pearsall is more likely to be the one that does not play. And it's sad to see, because I do have shares of him as a overall fantasy player in some leagues, but he's been awesome so far. 2 of the first 3 games had over 100 yards. 1 game was with Purdy. 1 game was with Mac Jones. So it doesn't matter the guy. And so the first half, he started off really strong, caught 4 for 46 in the first half, and then tweaked his knee, and he did not return to the game. I have YouTube TV, so I was doing the quad box, and I had that game in the top left-hand corner. I saw that, got an alert from Schefter saying that he has returned, and then in the drives that mattered, he had his helmet off, and he was just on the sideline. So with him being a short week, Tuesday, not non-participant in the walkthrough as well, like I said, if you have to tell me one of these 2 guys is for sure missing, who is this guy? I think it's Ricky Pearsall. But at the same time, there is a good possibility that both could be out. And if that is the case, all these guys are in play. Can't give you a dog in the fight. Shoot, it could be a Jake Tonjes day. This is the last game, or before George Kittle is eligible to return from IR. But Jake Tonjes leading the team in tight end snaps each of the last 3 weeks, 79% in week 2, 69 and 68 in week 3 and 4, respectively. He's had a really strong game. Most recently, last week, 3 for 58 and a score. Caught the game go-ahead touchdown in week 1 in his first game in relief of George Kittle, who left the game early, and then was just okay in the other weeks prior. So, I mean, they're all in the pool. Can't tell you one way or the other. This could be a Kyle Juszczyk game. I mean, he's had at least 5 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games so far, mostly as in a pass catching role because he doesn't have a rushing attempt yet. So we've seen him before on showdown slates that he just catches a touchdown, rushes for a 1-yard touchdown, and pops off. But at those occasions, he was usually less than $1,000. Now you got to pay $2,000 for him, but at the same time, I mean, he ends up playing, roughly 35% of the snaps on good game scripts. So another name. This could just be a game where 10 different receivers catch a pass. Nobody gets there, but it's just who you got to pick somebody from the 49ers. I mean, Sky Moore, like we said, has barely played. He's $800, but if both are out, he could catch a deep ball or a screen pass that gets you there. All you need usually with less than $1,000 is just a catch or two to really get there. Last week we had Elijah Arroyo as one of our plays, and he had 2 for 44. That was awesome for a less than $1,000 player. If you want to talk straight from a projection perspective, Luke Farrell is projected for 2.7 on RotoWire. So 2 of the 3 games since Kittle has been missing the entire game, he's had 2 catches in both of those games. I don't know if 2 for 20 gets you there for 1,600 because of the other value you could really get out of the other guys. But all these 49ers it's reasonable to convince yourself any of them. I would just kind of sprinkle if you do play multiple line. If you did have a dog in the fight, I mean, it's kind of similar to what we said about Buffalo, the couple slates prior with the Miami game where I couldn't tell you between Keon and Shakir who were the same price, who was going to go off. And Shakir and him were duds the entire game, but Shakir caught the touchdown, in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, yeah, like that's just kind of is what it is. Brian Robinson, just want to say that he's been having pretty strong relief efforts, but from a fantasy perspective has been a nothing burger. So $2,400, I want nothing to do with that thus far. He could pop in for a touchdown and still maybe not even be in the optimal line. So in terms of upside, I mean, you could convince yourself the narrative of Demarcus Robinson. In the revenge spot, you got Kendrick Bourne returning. He's done well on showdown slates before for San Francisco in his first stint with the team. And it all just comes down to whether or not Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, whether they're in or not. We'll do some hypotheticals and pretend when we do some lineup building later, but that is just what it is for the 49ers. For the Rams, kind of more self-explanatory. There's one piece of injury news that we'll be waiting on, but Puka Nacua. He was our thumbnail last week, and what a thumbnail week we had. All 4 thumbnails ended up scoring touchdowns for us. Should have done a parlay. It was really cool, but Puka Nacua, who was awesome each of the first 3 weeks, saved his best for the time that we invested the most in him. And caught his first receiving touchdown of the year and was 13 for 170 and a score. Possibly could have had more, but basically the Rams on their tied 20-20 drive just scored on the first play to Tutu Atwell for 88 yards out of nowhere. So he could have went over 200 yards, 15 plus catches, maybe even caught the touchdown if they had a long sustaining drive, but ended up just kind of putting it away early. But this is what we talked about on the main slate, was just 12 opportunities. And then, he didn't get to 100 yards, but he had the 45-yard rushing touchdown. And then the next week, 15 targets. The week after, 15 targets. He has rushing upside. He has pass catching upside. He's the best PPR-friendly option that you can think of right now, as long as he is, knock on wood, staying healthy. So because of the way he plays, I mean, he's flirted with some injuries each of the last couple years. I don't remember if he missed time during his rookie year, but his sophomore year, I know he went to IR early in the season, and the week he came back and we were just like, it's a wait and see, but they effed up on the pricing, especially on FanDuel. He was minimum price, $4,000 minimum price on the Monday slate, and on DK, I think he was minimum price on the showdown slate. So he was an auto click, and not everybody was convinced. So a minimum price guy was getting way less ownership than you should have for an obvious play. And obviously he went for 100 yards in his first game back, and it's just like, if he's going to be in there, you got to play him. You just have to play him. And so he is, as this offense goes. Matthew Stafford has been excellent, I would say, so far this year. In terms of fantasy output, it's always a tricky track with him because he doesn't have any rushing upside. And it's purely just, does he is he involved on multiple touchdowns? And when he's not, 18 points at 10-4, I don't know if that gets it done. But I know 13.6 and 14.8 definitely do not. So he is exactly who he's going to. It's just whether or not he'll be involved on 2 touchdowns. That is what it comes down to when it is Matthew Stafford. I don't care about the fourth against quarterbacks. It's just, if you think this is a lower scoring game, hypothetically, say Kyron is involved on a touchdown, can he get him? Can Stafford on the other 2 be involved, or is this a multi-touchdown rushing touchdown? Is this a lower scoring game? And those are the questions that you need to ask yourself when you're talking about game script with him, because Puka Nacua, like we said, is matchup proof. Devontae Adams has been seamless with his first few games with the Rams. 4 games so far as a sample size with Matthew Stafford. He's caught a touchdown 3 straight. Last week he was limited all week, and not necessarily a game time decision, but just a true questionable going into the weekend for last week's game. Catches a touchdown, 456 in the score. Just solid output once again. 600 is honestly a complicated price because of the fact that this slate include Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, who have 20-point floors on most games. So it's a really difficult lineup building when you do both of those guys and then a quarterback and then trying to fit in Devontae Adams. And I'll show you an example of how hard it is later. And I know there is value galore down low, but at the same time, I don't think you necessarily need builds this week that are going to be just jamming 4 at the top, go 2 punts, and then figure it out. I think you can get away with some balance if we think about some injury. In terms of other pass catching options, like we said, Tutu Atwell caught the 88-yarder. That was his only catch of the game. Only catch since week 1. He has barely played. He had less than 30. He had a season low 28% of the snaps. He just happened to be the guy that was wide open at the end of the game and caught a touchdown. And so for that very reason, it's worth mentioning his name. I'm just going to click him just so he can stay there. The injury news that I was mentioning, Tyler Higbee. He's been getting most of the snaps at tight end. Last year, they just kind of went tight end by committee. This year, it's not as everybody's getting 40%. Obviously, Higbee was out until December last year, recovering from an ACL injury. So they did have to do with the Davis Allen, Kobe Parkinson, and I forget the third guy's name that we had to see who was going to get the catch on those showdown slates last year. This year, it's more self-explanatory. But at the same time, Higbee, after finishing the season strong, having a really strong playoff performance, especially against the Eagles, I remember him catching a touchdown there, has been pretty spotty. He didn't even have a target week 1. Weeks 2 and 4, he had 4 and 5 targets, but then week 3 didn't catch either of his 2 that were thrown his way. He's flirted with just about high 50% of the snaps in most of the games, so I would expect that would be the thing. Thing is, if he is out, because he was a non-participant on Monday's estimated practice report, there's been no updates since then. If he's hypothetically out, though, Davis Allen, he's had a target every single game. He's caught 2 touchdowns already. So that's really strong positive news for a $1,200 player that gets increased snaps. Kobe Parkinson was a showdown darling for us last year. He would likely inherit the most. And then Terrence Ferguson is the rookie that was hyped up, but he has been a healthy scratch each of the last 2 weeks. So with that said, limited snaps so far. So maybe if he does come in and he's minimum price and he's active, I wouldn't expect him to be eclipsing either of the previous 2 in terms of snap share. But all you need for $200 is one freaking target. Catch your target, go for 8 yards, and you're good to go. As long as you nail the other 4 or 5. Tight end wise, it's pretty self-explanatory. Did want to mention Jordan Whittington, former Longhorn, shout out from Cuero High School. Jordan Whittington has been playing a lot of snaps. He just hasn't had boom games. But $1,000, it's kind of surprising because Tutu Atwell is $3,200. He has been out-snapped every single game so far by Jordan Whittington all season long. And it's not like he has targets once he comes in. Like I said, he's had 1 target essentially every game. 2 games he didn't catch that target. And then 2 games he caught a target. 1 was only for 4 yards. The other was an 88-yard blown coverage touchdown. Jordan Whittington, meanwhile, in week 1, 50% of the snaps. Then he went to 64. Then he went to 50. And then back up all the way to 80% this past week. So I'm assuming that was because Devontae Adams, Devontae still played 80% of the snap. 80% is a pretty healthy chunk for somebody $1,000. 6 targets in the last 3 weeks. You're coming off an 80% snap share. Let's say it averages out to high 60s. going forward on a short week. He also had a couple rushing attempts for what it was worth as well in week 3, and then week 5, week 1, he had a 5-yard rush. So I think he's a sneaky fun pool. And on top of that, especially say hypothetically, both San Francisco receivers miss, and you have to decide between the Kendrick Bournes and the Demarcus Robinsons and try to pick which 49er is going to be the value. What if the value is Jordan Whittington? Maybe he's the guy that catches, 3 for 30. And for $1,000, that is going to smash, especially if you nail your captain. But it allows you to force so much if you do go that low. So I think he's a sneaky fun play. I don't know how ownership is going to reflect on him, but I think he's one of the funner names, not including the injuries based on price, because there's no reason these two should have $2,200 in difference of salary. I will say that. In terms of running backs, Blake Corum is starting to play a little bit more. And we said last year, I remember specifically, he was the best fade you could think of because Sean McVay doesn't like doing running back by committee. He is just grind the guy into the ground or until the wheels fall off. And Kyron Williams has never been the most efficient back, but he's been a just grind it out, going to get you your 15 to 16, limited pass catching upside, but he's going to share all the snaps. Everybody was on Blake Corum as a 1B, as a handcuff to overtake role, and he was one of the worst duds in terms of value last year. Never got anything going. But then this year, they drafted another running back, Jarquez Hunter. Jarquez Hunter started sneaking into the top 200 in the later rounds of best ball drafts. And I was just like, and this was all summer. If you were a Blake Corum stand, nothing has changed at all. And if it did, Blake Corum's getting that word before Jarquez Hunter is. That is just factually what's going to happen. And so far, that has been the exact case. Jarquez Hunter has not played a snap yet. Blake Corum has had snap increases or has had really solid roles each of the first 4 weeks. Only played 10 snaps in week 1 in a grinded out game against Houston, but then since then has averaged high 28-ish% of snaps. And that's resulted in about, at least 5 opportunities each of the last 3 weeks. And they've been solid. I mean, he had 8.5 or more than 8.5 yards a carry against Tennessee. I know that's one of the worst run defenses, but it's still impressive performance. Follow that up with another impressive performance against Philly's defense. 8 for 53. And then last week had a season high 11 opportunities. Obviously was very inefficient with those opportunities, had a negative 5 yards catching a couple screens, and then didn't really do anything on the ground. But $3,000, it's an okay price. But I just want to point out, he's in the player pool just because Blake Corum, just because Kyron, even though he is getting the majority in all of the important snaps, I mean, I think they're starting to give him some relief at times. But then this season, again, not the most impressive or gaudy, but it is just worth mentioning Kyron Williams last year. He is what helped save their season when both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and multiple offensive linemen were out. Going against San Francisco, he goes up and he puts up a 3-touchdown effort in a shocking come-from-behind win with 116 all-purpose yards, 31 fantasy points. Did it all by himself. Followed that up with another performance going for 110 all-purpose yards as well. He just didn't score a touchdown, but each of his last 3 against San Francisco as a whole has gone for over 100 all-purpose yards every single one of those games. 5 touchdowns in those 3 games. And 28, 31 and a half, and 16 fantasy points. Him being $9,000, I think is very reasonable. So I really like me some Kyron Williams this week. Don't know if I consider him a lock just because I think the 2 locks are pretty self-explanatory once we get to that point. But he is in the pool. If I had to make a 3 max build, he's probably going in 2 of the 3 lines, maybe possibly all 3, depending on what the news comes out once we get later to the Thursday slate. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to go through all of our must plays, fades, contrarian plays, and our props of the night. And it is a fun and interesting slate because this was already going to be fun to begin with, but it just opens up a complete amount of chaos because of the unknowns to not only the quarterback, both San Francisco's receivers, the tight end spot. This could be a complete 180 slate of my perspective, and this video could be completely irrelevant by the time you watch this leading up to the slate. So you just have to be keeping an eye out on the injury news, and then also, like we said in Discord, right before, usually roughly an hour before lock, we usually post of our final looks, and we usually do 2 to 3 lines for the Thursday slate. So Must plays, like we said, very, very obvious. Mine is Christian McCaffrey. Essentially, he's a wide receiver, one that plays running back, and he has just yet to punch one in terms of the running backs. He's been awesome this year, and I just expect it to stay that way. Not saying that he is going to guaranteed get the 15 targets like he has back-to-back games, but if San Francisco is going to keep this game close at all, it is going to be only because of Christian. It is just worth noting they are number one against running backs, but he is one of the most matchup-proof running backs ever in terms of this era of fantasy football if he's healthy. And right now he is just healthy enough to be getting north of 28 opportunities a game in 3 of the 4 games so far. Puka Nacua is going to be Emery's must play. He actually says Puka over CMC if you had to pick one. I don't think you're going to need to pick between two on this slate. But like we said, Puka has just been the wide receiver one. I think I saw a stat where Rome Odunze is wide receiver 3 through 4 weeks. He is closer to Ricky Pearsall as wide receiver 21 than he is for eclipsing Puka Nacua. That is how wide of a gap he has separated himself from the rest of the guys. And until he pops up with injuries, he is matchup proof. He is one of the safest plays to play. And I'm not sure if there's a multi-touchdown upside for either, but that could be the difference in terms of captain. If one of them gets to the 30-point threshold, or if they're just going to both be in 20, they both need to be in your line, but I just don't know if one will separate themselves over the other. But Emery does have a lean to Puka if you had to pick one for your line. My fade is going to be Davante Adams. And it's not like I hate him. I don't hate the matchup. He scored in 3 straight touchdowns, so it's scary considering him a fade. But you got to fade somebody. And up top, and I'll show this when we do some builds. Once again, if you are Davante Adams love in this kind of slate, it's impossible to build almost going Puka, Christian, one of the quarterbacks, and Davante Adams. It is almost impossible. And even if it does, have 2 viable plays, you are double punting below $2,000 on your last 2 guys in. That's just I don't think you need to do that on this slate. I don't think that's what's going to be optimal. And so with that said, the reason is that, and then also I compared him and Kyron together. And I honestly, if they were the same price, I would side with Kyron in this one. Not only the matchup or recent history against San Francisco, but also saving $600. I think he's a safer play. And so that's why I went the way I did with Davante. If you like Davante, play Davante. I'm not saying he's a pure fade, especially if you do 150 lines. But if I'm only going to do 3 max, he's probably not going to be in any of those lines. Emery's fade, whoever the quarterback is for San Francisco, is going to be his fade. Brock Purdy is listed as 10,200, whereas Mac Jones is 9,200. And in this environment, both of them are probably going to need to get north of 16, 17 points. They could in garbage time, especially if they're playing from behind and playing catch up, going no huddle the entire fourth quarter, kind of similar to what Kyler had to do last week against the Seattle Seahawks. They can get there, but in a closer game where it's just back and forth, or the Rams just kind of shut them down like they have against kind of tougher competition, or like the Rams have done on defense throughout most of their games so far this year, shutting them down. I mean, Daniel Jones has been one of the brightest spots of the year, and then they forced him to have his first bad game of the year, multiple turnovers and stuff like that. So I completely understand whoever the San Francisco quarterback is. And like I said, it is really hard to build with quarterbacks on this slate. Even if Matthew Stafford is the preferred play, like I said, he has to score twice for him to mark off his 10,400 price tag. If he only scores 1 touchdown and Kyron ends up scoring 2, or the Rams only score a couple and one is just involved by him, I don't think he gets there for 10,400. So it's really tricky on quarterbacks. And, I think double quarterback is not the way to go on this slate, but one quarterback can be. And then just pick your poison on if San Francisco is going to be playing catch up, or if the Rams are just going to really take control of this game. Tournament plays. Mine is kind of a little bit of an asterisk right now, but I'm going to project that Ricky Pearsall does not play. Juwan Jennings, I don't know if he doesn't play, but even if he does, my tournament play in the event that one of the 2 San Francisco receivers between Jennings and Pearsall miss, I'm going to say Demarcus Robinson is my tournament play. He's kind of in the middle, just kind of chilling. Kendrick Bourne, he's already been a 49er for a couple weeks now and has had the most snaps outside of those 2 previously, and I think people are going to flock to that because of that. And then Marquez Valdez-Scantling, because he's cheaper, $1,000 cheaper. I would see people on a tournament play want to just really say, hey, if he's going to catch one, it's going to be 40 yards. So that's going to pay off at his salary. And then Demarcus Robinson is just going to sit there and get north of 50 to 60% of the snaps. Being 3,600, it's not sexy at all. But I think it's a fun way. He's kind of in the middle of all these guys. Tutu Atwell, like I said previously, when he caught the game-winning touchdown, people that might skew his ownership a tad. Blake Corum's there. He's just in a weird spot in terms of price, and I don't think many people are going to be on him. So if you have to pick between these ugly names at receiver, I'll go ahead and ride with him. And then my contingency is if both receivers, Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, do not, or I'm sorry. And my contingency is if both receivers somehow, Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, do play, my tournament play is going to be the Los Angeles Rams defense at $4,000. That is way, way too cheap in terms of in terms of how I expect this game to go. 3 of the 4 games so far this season, they've had at least 8 fantasy points. Their only dud was Philly's come from behind win, where they had only allowed 7 points to them through about 2.5 quarters before they turned on the Jets. But they've got 14 sacks through 4 weeks. Only one game that they've allowed more than 20 points. And they've also created a bunch of turnovers. So they've had 6 turnovers through 4 weeks as well. They find ways to get there. It's one of the better defenses in the NFL. And I'm honestly shocked by the pricing, because I thought that this would be one where they would put the Rams defense above the kickers. That's how much I thought they would be valued on the slate. Being at home, 5.5 point favorite going in. And it's only going to get worse if hypothetically Purdy does not play, or one or both of the receivers don't play. So I just think that's too cheap. They're going to be in some of my lines, but I'm just saying DeMarcus, it's kind of cheating saying that they would be the play, because if neither receiver play, I think a $4,000 Rams defense might be 30% owned. But if both do play, maybe everybody wants to go high-low to try to afford a bunch of, maybe double quarterback, double expensive guys are must plays or what have you. And it'll be less balanced build, so maybe they'll organically not fit in lines. But I like that. Props of the night. Mine is going to be, for now, because there is basically nothing out because of the unknowns of injuries, Kyren Williams over 68.5 rushing yards is what I'm going to say my over is. I'm going to keep my train rolling. I've picked 3 tight ends in a row in terms of props of the night for showdown slates each of the last 3 weeks, and all of them have hit over. I wanted to again, but Jake Ton just doesn't excite me, and then the Rams don't have any tight end props because of the Tyler Higbee unknown. So with that said, got to roll with one, Kyren. If there was an all-purpose yards out and it was right around 80 yards, I'd probably side with that. It's not out yet as far as of this recording on a Tuesday night. But Kyren, 68.5 yards, all 3 games in his last 3 against the 49ers. He's gone over 100 all-purpose yards. And so I feel really, really good about him. There might be better props for him later in the week, maybe fantasy score if it's less than 14. Smash if it's all-purpose yards, like I said, if it's first half yardage, second half yardage. There might be better props out there, but I think he's the most reasonable of all the guys. And on top of that, if San Francisco has multiple receivers ruled out early and they actually put up some numbers for some of these young guys, taking your chance for somebody to hit 24 yards might be the better must play of the night. But for the time being, Kyren Williams, 68.5, I think he can get there. He's just, as steady as can be. And all he's got to do is just continue having his 17, 18 carries a game. And I think he can get there pretty easily in the game where he is playing from ahead, positive environment, and then good recent success against the 49ers. Emery's. This is insane how it's this much and he is still going over, and it makes all the sense in the world. But it is Puka Nacua over 8.0 receptions. So you get the push at 8, but he feels really good about him going over the 8 receptions. He has not gone under in any of the 4 games so far this season. He has pushed one time, and that was in a game where they were playing from ahead, blowing out the Titans. But other than that, in positive game scripts, he's had 10, 11, and 13 receptions. Those aren't typos. So he's one of the best volume kings in the world. 9 receptions is a lot, but at the same time, there's very limited options in terms of props so far. Again, he might change his if we get more news coming out. But yeah, I mean, it's as good as it would play based on the numbers recently as we've seen. So that's his prop of the night. And now jumping back over, we're going to start building some lines. And again, like I said, we gotta play pretend a little bit on these. So bear with me, and again, check the news and up to date, stay up to date with everything going on, because we've got about 4 different names that we're still waiting on news on going into this slate. I'm going to build Emery's first look. And one thing I will say, especially if at least one of the receivers for the 49ers misses, leave salary on the table. That is the only way to get different. It is so easy to do so. And my only recommendation is just put Puka and Christian both in the line. Decide whether or not you want to put one of them at captain. I think it's probably a good idea to do one. And if you play multiple lines, maybe you can mix and match. But make sure both of them are in your line, and then leave salary on the table. Don't because it could be a heavily duped slate if you just have this guy out, that guy out. You got 200 remainder. That's probably going to be duped by a lot of people. So, and it's not like I can just say Kendrick Bourne is for sure going to dominate all the reps and touches to where MVS or Demarcus Robinson won't come close to him. Build a line that has one that you can afford Kendrick Bourne, but then leave everything the same, go all the way down to one of them, leave 1,500, 2,000 on the table, and then will be way less due, have similar upside. That's really how I like to play things. Kind of similar to a Monday Showdown slate with the Jets and the Dolphins, where I had a line that was 100 remaining. I knew was going to be heavily duped. And so all I did was I flipped the captain. And this was Emery's idea, so shout out to him. Flip it, Justin Fields be the captain, Devon Achane be the flex. Same lineup, 900 remainder, and Justin Fields salvaging his day with 27 fantasy points, ends up outproducing Devon Achane by 10, and you end up 3-4xing your line because of the fact that everybody that was playing those same 6 was going with Devon Achane at the captain. So just think about those things. So first look for Emery. He's going to go ahead and start off with Puka Nacua, his must play at captain, and he is going to select Christian McCaffrey as his guy. He's also going to pair Puka with Matthew Stafford, and then in his first look, he is going to pretend Ricky Pearsall will be in and active, so he's going to put him in, and again, easily, hypothetically say he's out, Juwan Jennings is in, do the same line, but play Juwan Jennings, if that is the scenario that happens, and I think Emery would agree with you, and that might still be his first look if he ends up going about that. And so last guy's in. Obviously, like I said, it gets really, really tough when you go 3 dominant up top with the dominant captain. But his last guys in are going to be Luke Farrell and Jordan Whittington, the guy I told you about getting all the snaps. And he is way too cheap based on the price that Tutu Atwell is, and maybe a lesser name. So 800 remainder. And on top of that, like I said, say Pearsall's out, Juwan Jennings is in. Same lineup, has similar upside. It has similar upside, and you have 1,600 remainder with a dominant captain, way less duped with $1,600 remainder. So just think about that when you're doing stuff. He doesn't have a contrarian build just because there's too many unknowns to know what is contrarian in this regard. But I'm going to just kind of play around, throw you some scenarios. This time, I don't really, like I said, have a dog in the fight. If I played 3 lines, I might flip a coin and say, Christian, you're 2 of my captains. Puka, you're 1 of my captains. Don't really have a clear-cut mid-price captain. So far, I don't think you need to. But what I did say earlier was I want Kyron in at least 2 of my 3 lines if I'm doing the 3 max build. $9,000 reasonable price. But again, I'll show you in a little bit how difficult it is to build if you go up top to 1. For the time being, we're going to throw Stafford in there. 950 remaining per player is really, really tough. So with my build, I'm going to project that Tyler Higbee misses. So I'm going to go with Jordan Whittington, and I'm going to go with Kobe Parkinson, who has had 2 targets in 2 of the 3 games he's played this year. And for $800, we've seen him on showdowns before. $300, I would like to get a little bit more I would like to get a little bit more of a, $300. I'd like to probably be, with all of my lines, I would like to have at least $500 remaining. If in a perfect world is what I would say. But again, to each of their own. I think in this line, you have just enough to afford Puka captain if you prefer. Oh, I did the same thing. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Put Christian at flex. Puka cap. There you go. So because they're so close in price, I am shocked that both are under $12,000. I thought both would be north of 12 and then just figure it out. And they would try to force you to pick one or the other to line up construct the way you want to. They didn't do that. You can easily put one at captain and still have a very strong build. So kind of mine ends up being very similar. It's a 5-1 build and you got the main 49 that you want. But let's play around. Let's do something a little bit more balanced. Once again, I'm very likely going to just do that or vice versa for every single line that I build. I want to go no quarterback on this one though to try to save a little value. So putting Kyron back in, and then with that said, I think I have enough to do what I want to do. So I'm going to go Rams defense, and then you go down to Demarcus Robinson, and then you have enough to get back to a Kendrick Bourne. So this is a 3-3 build, kind of interesting. $100 remainder. Let's pretend that both are out on this one. So you get possibly the wide receiver 1 and 2 for the 49ers with their, high pass catching, basically their true wide receiver 1 right now in Christian McCaffrey. And then you, again, can afford Puka captain if you want, but $0 remainder. I really don't want to do that on these flex plays. But yeah, doing that. And I just wanted to show you real quick because my Devontae Adams fade. This is kind of the reason why it's really tough to do unless you go with a cheap captain. But say if you're playing Puka, you're also playing Devontae, probably unlikely that Matthew Stafford isn't also going to get there. So putting both of them in there and then trying to afford Christian, you average $600 per guy. So the only logical build that I can see is Jordan Whittington and say Tyler Higbee's out. So that's enough for, say, Terrence Ferguson. Maybe he gets 20% of the snaps, gets a target or two, but it's zeroed out. So I think people will do that, especially if Higbee's ruled out. And then otherwise, if you're not doing that, you can't even afford Sky Moore and Kobe Parkinson. Isaac Guerrero has not played so far this year. And all these guys down here are not projected for fantasy points right now. So you can't even do a build other than minimum price. Probably it's only Jake Ferguson Probably it's only Terrence Ferguson at this point until further notice. And then you pick your poison between Jordan Whittington, who had 80% of the snaps, Sky Moore, who has barely played, or Kobe Parkinson. I don't know why you'd go double Ram tight end. That is not even the one that is going to get the most snaps, which will likely be Davis Allen. So that's why it's so tough and what I don't like building with Devontae. But let's do something a little different. Let's try to do a mid-price captain, right? I think the obvious answer is if one of these guys plays and the other doesn't, they could have a really solid role into where they have a 12-point floor as long as they stay healthy and are in the game, and that allows you to afford something. So let's play some pretend. Like I said, I think it's more likely than not Pearsall misses. If only one were to miss, then Juwan Jennings. So let's say Juwan goes in at captain, and let's see what we can do. So let's go Puka. Let's go Christian. Let's go Stafford, and then see how really your salary shrinks up from there. Rams D, that's enough for MVS if you want to go that route. So you got a 4-2 build, or I'm sorry, a 3-3 build, but it's tough because you've got the losing team and captain. You've got the Rams defense you're trying to afford. If you don't like the Rams defense, you can throw in Demarcus Robinson, but then that's all 3 49er receivers. I don't really think that's a great strat. Maybe it's a kicker slate. Maybe you want to go punt down a little further, put in some Kyle Hughes check. That's still not enough for a kicker, so you might have to play around a little more. Maybe go down to Davis Allen at 1,200. That's enough for either kicker, I believe. Yeah, Joshua Carty, 17 points in against the Eagles, had 6 field goal attempts, missed 2, but got there because of his opportunity. Had 2 field goals in the other 2 games, so 9-10 points, pretty solid. 5,400 because his name's Joshua Carty. I think less people will play him. I think people don't mind playing kickers when they're kickers that they know, but when it's Eddie Pinheiro, Joshua Carty, I think they're going to be less excited. But Eddie Pinheiro, in the 3 games that he's played since Jake Moody went out, he's had 7 field goals, 3 games, made all 7, and he's gotten to 10 fantasy points in 2 of those games. So if the 49ers are just going to be kicking field goals, it ends up being a 2 to 3 field goal opportunity for him. He could pan out too. So putting that on the board. not against that. I also think that no quarterback is a positive and possible strat. Let me try to do in that scenario, play one of the running backs at captain, because you would anticipate it's a multi-touchdown game from one of them, and that is the why their quarterback does not get there in a ideally 2 or 3 touchdown game, which is what's kind of implied between both teams right now. So you got the two dominant guys. You got Kyron Williams, the captain. Might go a little overlooked because of the other options. I'm hoping at least, even though he's a reasonable price at 9,000, 4,500 remainder. You can kind of play around, do what you want. Let's go Rams defense, $4,700 per. That's not enough for Kendrick Bourne plus Eddie Pinheiro, but let's say Demarcus Robinson, my tournament play, is there, and then that's 5,900. That's enough for either kicker, but let's be a little bit more different. Let's do a 3-3 build, 900 remainder. You get there, and I think that's enough for you if you wanted to have a better captain. Go with Kyron at the flex, and then actually it's not enough. So in this scenario, with these specific 6, you would have to go with Kyron at the captain at 13.5. 900 remainder, even though it's 900 remainder, I like this spot. I like this build. Maybe you feel a little better if you have the other kicker. Okay, fine. You still got 500 remainder, and you might be a little bit more duped because it's closer to the 0. But 4-2 build, pretty solid. I don't know if you necessarily need to get to a 5-1 build for the Rams. I think it just kind of organically, I think a lot of people are going to organically have 3-3 builds because they're going to put in a Puka, probably pair him with either Devontae and or Matthew Stafford, or even Kyron for that matter. And then the value plays are going to be the San Francisco guys. So doing that, maybe the value plays are instead Jordan Whittington or Davis Allen. So maybe they're going to be having less ownership than the San Francisco receivers by default. And so maybe a 5-1 build is the way to get different on this slate. So yeah, that's a couple builds for you guys. Once again, you're going to have to just be paying attention when we look at news coming out. Obviously, I'm recording this as a Tuesday night. This is going to be released Wednesday morning. So if you are following along, just make sure that you're keeping up to date with the news, and we'll keep you posted. If you do have any questions, please reach out to us in Discord, tweet at us, do whatever you got to do. But we appreciate you guys. If you've listened this far, please leave a like. Let us know what you think. Who are some of your plays that you would not mind getting different? Some possible strategies that you'd like to do to switch things up. I'd be really excited and interested to hear what you guys have to say. So thank you guys. Can't thank you guys enough for getting us over that $300 bump. We were kind of sitting there around 270s for a while. And so this last video did a really strong way to get us above that threshold. And I'm just ready to keep on growing with you guys and want to keep on interacting in the Discord, on all of our social media platforms, whatever you got for us, send us our way. And again, this isn't a talking at you. This is talking with you guys. We're going to be shouting out anybody that throws anything out there that you like, you end up panning out, we're going to shout you out. So can't thank you enough for tuning in. We will see you guys on the next one.